And welcome. In Australia, he worked for Actors Equity and the Theatrical and Amusement Employees Association and the Media Arts and Entertainment, or Media Entertainment and Arts. More recently, he represented English actors in the UK in shows being duplicated from the US. He's retired now, but he's continued to do many things, including recently judging for the Adelaide Fringe. Hello to Stephen Spence. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Now, I've known you for quite a long time as a union representative, but I didn't know that before all of that, before becoming and working for the union, you were a young actor.
I was. I came from Belfast.
I would never have guessed.
There you go, from a working family. So all my mum's lot were shipyard workers and all my dad's lot were NCOs in the British military. And I thought I didn't fancy that. So one day this production came to our school. I remember it as The Merchant of Venice. I think it was a company called Interplay. And I remember a Stephen Ray, a very well-known Irish actor who was in it. And so we were all there lobbing things and yahooing and carrying on. And so we went to the drama teacher afterwards and said, "Sir, did you see us?" And he said, "Yes, you were behaving like a normal Elizabethan mob." So the actors...
That's true though, isn't it?
It's true. Yes. That's exactly true. Yes. What used to happen. So one of their great rewards was they came to the dining hall and they got our lovely school dinners as part of their day. And of course we were prompting them and saying, "Well, what do you do, as well as this?" And they were saying, "Well, no, we do this.
This is what we do.
We're actors." Yep. And we said, no, but for a quid. What do you do for a quid,
Yeah, we act.
We do this. And I don't know what I'd thought before, but something clicked in my head, and suddenly I thought, all those people on television, on all those shows, everybody in cinema, they were actors, and they got paid for it.
It's their job.
And almost straight away I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be an actor. Which in Belfast in the 1970s wasn't a terribly easy
thing I'm sure it wasn't.
To do.
Well, I don't know that it was easy anywhere in the 1970s, quite frankly, because there was definitely an attitude, which still is around today a bit, that acting wasn't a real job.
Oh, look, I went home to my father and said, I want to be an actor. He was, of course, delighted. Tried to talk me into doing absolutely anything else.
Work in the shipyard instead.
But I got the yellow pages, the big phone book in those days, and I literally started ringing people up and saying, I want to be an actor, I want to be an actor. And this fella, Tony Dinner, who was the artistic director at the Lyric Theatre in Belfast, I mean, when I think about it now, he saw me, he got me to come in. And he said, "Well, what have you done?" And I said, "Well, I've done the nativity play and the school play and the pantomime I've been in."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, I can't put you on this stage unless you're a member of Equity." And because in those days you couldn't work without an Equity card. Yep. And I said, "Well, what's that? I'll buy one of those." And he, "Well, it's not as easy as that."
Buy one of those.
So they had a thing coming up called the Lyric Drama Studio. It was youth wing, experimental wing. It was acting lessons, dancing lessons, singing lessons. And there's about 60 of us were put together. And the audition process was 13 weeks of being in these lessons, doing the workshops, and then they were cutting it down to 30. And after about, the first 5 minutes, all I wanted was, I've got to make this cut. I have got to make this cut. And I pulled every trick in the book to make the cut. And at the end of the 13 weeks, I made the cut, So it was quite extraordinary. We did plays like Saved by Edward Bond, The Marat Sad by Peter Weiss.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
The full title of that play, as you may know, is The Persecution and Assassination of Jean-Paul Marat, as performed by the inmates of the asylum of Charenton under the direction of the Marquis de Sade.
Yes, just a small title.
Small. And I got the role of Coulmier, who was the director of the asylum. And pretty much I ended up being the director of asylum for about the next 40 years when I went into all of these other
I can imagine.
roles.
So we've got a photo of you at this age, I think, when you were just sort of starting off. Look at you there.
Yeah.
Who were you supposed to be?
Well, that was my sultry look. I was going for Marlon Brando, at that time, because I thought that might get me some work,
Yes.
And when I came out, it did. I mean, I worked in Northern Ireland for a lot of years, and then I went to England. This one was actually Proteus Theatre Company in Basingstoke, Christmas at Crumbling Manor.
Okay.
One of their
A comedy, I suspect.
Oh yes, a jolly Yuletime romp. I think they called it.
Okay, but this is here in Australia. This show.
Yeah, because what I did after a while is I got to work for a lot of community theatres, a lot of political theatre companies. 784 in England, which was a socialist theatre company named after 7% of the population owned 84% of the wealth, and in Junction, which was up there.
Yep. You were the drummer in that.
I was the drummer in that show. It was an art and working life company, which was the same stuff. We went out to community halls. We went to shipyards. You know, we did a tour up to Sydney in the dockyards up there. That was one called Checkout. So they did the usual thing, can you play the drums? And every actor says, yes.
Oh, yes, of course.
I can play the drums.
And quickly go home and try and learn fast.
I played the drums in that show. I had never played the drums before. I've never played the drums since.
We used to, when you auditioned for somebody, particularly film, you'd fill out a form that had, can you ride a horse? Can you deep sea dive? You'd tick everything.
That's it.
Yeah, I'll learn.
Get the job and learn how to do it. So I'd spent, the time in Ireland working as an actor and then stage managing as well. I thought my clever thing was I would always be in the theatre if I did both acting work and stage managing. Bit of a mistake because all the actors thought you were really a stage manager, all the stage managers thought you were really an actor.
Yep.
So you tended not to get the best jobs in either area, you know.
Yep.
But nevertheless, I did it for nearly a decade.
But it changes your knowledge of how the business works.
Well, it does. It does. It totally does.
You need to know both sides of.
Yes. And as in the stage management, part of your job is managing the actors,
exactly,
which
yes.
is never an easy task because actors are marvelously creative people and have quite an anarchic element in terms of how they do stuff, which is where the creativity blossoms even further.
Of course, yes.
But if you're trying to get a show on the road and into a venue by a certain time and get a truck unloaded and you've only got a window, that can be very difficult. So I did all of that. And then one time I went to a community theatre conference in Australia, and I'd already worked out, I had an agent here, Spotlight, Lynn Pike and Chrissy Page.
Yes, correct.
And they were getting me whatever work they could get. And somebody said to me, because it was before the days when Belfast people were in neighbours, so somebody said to me, look, you're Irish, you'll get the thug, the terrorist, the security guard, and you might get the Bailey's Irish Cream and the Guinness voiceover if they manage to make it in Adelaide, And didn't exactly work out like that, but near enough, And when I went to this community theatre conference, Sue Beale, who was the Assistant Federal Secretary of Actors Equity of Australia, and she had been the South Australian Secretary, she had been the Secretary down here.
She was also a well-known stage manager too, as I recall.
Absolutely. Yeah. She worked on Here's Humphrey when she started out. And she said, look, actor, stage manager, you've been talking at this conference, so, you'd be a perfect union organizer. Why don't you come and apply for a job at the union? Which was never something I thought of doing. Like I had my union ticket. I was an equity deputy, which was like what we called a shop steward on the cast. So you liaise between the cast and the office. But I'd never thought of being a union official. But I had fairly left-wing politics. So there was, on one level, it was appealing. On the other level, I thought, full-time union officials, keeping the workers under control. I don't know if I want to be doing that. But in the end, I decided to do it.
Well, it's quite a responsibility.
A big responsibility. I went for a job as federal theatre organiser based up in Sydney. I got it. First day there, there's 25 files on my desk. I said, what are those? They said, those are the national wage case. Oh, what do I do with that? You go and do it. So how do I find out? Well, you go and find out how to do it. And so I found out that the metal workers took a case to the commission. They argued for a pay rise. The commission awarded 3%, 5%. You then took the Actors Theatrical Award and you flowed through the money, and then you took the feature film, the Actors TV programs, you flowed the money through, so all the actors got a pay increase because the metal workers case was the leading case. That's how the system worked in Australia. I worked out how to do that. I went and did it. I started as a full-time trade union official, which I then did for over 35 years.
I think the general public don't sort of understand how this works, I don't think. They think either in the movies you're earning millions of dollars or you do it for fun through a local amateur theatre group or a community theatre group.
Yeah.
But the reality is that most actors are just jobbing actors, is the
Correct.
expression.
Yes. There's maybe 1%, if it's as much as that, who earn big money, you know, when they're stars in film and TV. And everybody else, even if they've had a fairly extensive career, jobbing actors, and the pay packets are not great.
No.
So every 3% you could get, every agreement that you could get, really boosted the wages and the conditions, and people could stay alive, and people could keep doing it.
Yes. And of course the other thing is it's about the ticket price that you pay to go and see people. And I think that the hardest thing for entrepreneurs is to get to a point of saying, you know, we know what we need to pay people, but will the general public pay this to come and see the show?
Yes.
Because we undervalue the arts.
Yes, we do.
Is the problem.
And in certain sectors, the arts are a market failure, so they do not work off the profit motive. So governments fund the arts. And of course, back in the day, part of the job that our union always did, we weren't just arguing for the wages, we were also arguing to get the funding.
Yes.
So one of the other jobs when I was secretary of the union here, I became the chair of the Arts Industry Council of South Australia.
Right.
Which was all of the companies.
Yes, to try and keep the money moving.
Yes.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, the actors, and you've got to say the producers, were the people who really cared about our industries.
Of course.
Everybody else liked it.
Yes, but it's their business too.
Yes.
We're going to be back and talk a lot more about that in just a moment. Our guest is Stephen Spence. Stephen, you had a very interesting time in Australia doing a whole lot of things. What made you go back to the UK?
Well, I'd done as much as I could do in Adelaide, you know, Film Corporation Board during the time we made Shine, as well as all of the union activity. And the industry was starting to move to the eastern states. The union asked me if I'd, you know, shift back to Sydney and take up an assistant federal secretary role. And at the time, I didn't want to.
Because you have a family as well.
Yeah, I had a family by this stage.
Yep.
Yeah, my partner Julia and Caitlin, our daughter, who was born in Adelaide. And so we talked about it, and there was also a bit that I would have gone to Sydney and Julia would rather have gone to Melbourne, and we couldn't quite agree. Anyway, we decided in the end, let's go to Europe for a bit. You know, and that was, you know, Julia as an Australian was saying, let's go to Europe for a bit. And we could because obviously I was born there. I've got Irish passports we were able to get. And so we went to the UK instead of me going back to Sydney again. And we were going for 3 to 5 years, and we ended up staying nearly 20 because again, I got into stuff. I actually made a switch for a while to the scientific side of the fence. I worked for a union called Prospect that dealt with engineers, managers, and scientists. And I thought I was going to get their cultural areas, like they had staff in the British Library, the British Museum, that kind of thing.
Yep.
But instead, I got a load of nuclear power stations, the Atomic Weapons Establishment.
Oh, goodness.
And the British Potato Council.
Oh.
So I think there might have been a few branches that were left
close.
over that,
clearly.
that nobody else was going to do. So I got those. And I went and did that work for a long, well, not a long period of time, 4 years. It seemed like a long period of time working in power stations.
If it isn't your passion.
No, it wasn't my passion.
Yeah.
And somebody said, well, what's it like on the other side of the fence? And in terms of the industrial work, it was same gig, different band. Because in the nuclear power stations, they were all as enthusiastic about their jobs and thought their jobs were the most important jobs in the world as actors are.
Yep.
But after those 4 years, a job came up with Equity in London, assistant general secretary, same job I'd turned down in Sydney, basically. Mm-hmm. I thought there's bound to be an internal candidate. There was. But I went in, and on the basis of what we'd done here, I got the job because they were very interested in getting their membership up and they were very interested in improving their contracts.
Right.
And without going on forever, that when I started there was about 33,000, the membership of British Equity. And when I left 15 years later, it just peaked at 48,000 just before COVID. And I did a lot of work on the organising stuff, thing we did here called grassroots unionism, really involving the members. Mm-hmm. And that can be demonstrated. They did it slightly differently there. They asked me to look at their agreements, and I said, look, some of your agreements, the rates are poor. So the West End of London, we decided we needed to have a big push. And there's a great story I'll tell you in a minute. But basically, we got all the actors, got them to come and meet the cast, to come and meet together, which had not really been done in the same way before. We were in the Actors' Church in Covent Garden. The meetings were all blessed by the vicar. And then we would have the meetings. And we had a very clear idea of what we wanted. And eventually we got to the point where the employers made a final offer. It was knocked back. I think they made a final offer. It was knocked back. And we were getting close. And there was one thing that was outstanding. We wanted an extra £50 on shows on Sunday. If somebody did one of the 8 shows on Sunday, extra 50 quid. The employer said, we are giving you fairly big increases. We tiered the theatres, small, medium, large.
Right.
And we were already getting on course to get increases between 10% and 40% on the minimum. Because all the actors said the minimum, you know, they were getting closer to the minimum. Their personal margin was shrinking. They were being shoved down. So we thought, push the minimum up. But this £50 for the Sunday, they were saying, if we're going to start doing Sundays more regularly, giving up seeing our friends and family, then we won't pay for it. And so we couldn't get there. Tried every trick in the book. Now, quite often you'll get one of the stars will say, I'll help you. And you never call on them because they're so busy and it's difficult for them.
And they're paid above the award rate.
Yes. Sir Ian McKellen, who's a British actor, Gandalf in Lord of the Rings.
I think everybody knows him.
There you go. Had said he would help. So I rang him up and said, Ian, you said you'd help. Could you? What do you want me to do? I want you to come to a negotiation with us. It's about the £50 on Sunday. We can't get it. I need you to help us with it. He agreed. So we walk into the negotiation and they're all there, you know, Cameron McIntosh's guys, you know, the folk from Andrew Lloyd Webber, Bill Kenwright. Oh, hello. And then Ian walks in at the end of it. I mean, the room just went silent. They all look round and it's like, oh, hello, Ian. Hello, how are you? Very pleased to meet you, you know. What are you doing here? And I said, well, Ian's part of our delegation. We'll let you know when we start. So we start. And Robert Noble said, look, I think Robert Noble was the chair of the employer side. He says, I think what we want to know, Ian, is you're here. What have you got to say? And he was absolutely brilliant, you know. I won't pretend to get it exactly right, but he was like, well, I have known all you people for so many years. I have worked for you all, and our relationships have been so good. But Stephen tells me that if I were to work for you on a Sunday, you could not see your way clear to pay me an extra £50. And I don't want to be on an equity picket line with a placard that says, pay me £50, but I feel I must, you know. So the employers are sitting there and they're like, all right, okay. So, well, we need an adjournment. So they adjourned. Out they go. 2 seconds later, the finger comes around the door, you know. Stephen come out, I came out and said, all right, you've got it. So that £50 in that agreement, Ian McKellen got that. And he got it from doing a stellar performance. And that was it, a stellar performance.
Well, he's a star. Yes. That's the thing, isn't it? There is something different about those people.
Yes, there is.
Yes, it's not just the command of the audience, it's the command of any audience.
Yeah, they can change things with the performance that they do. Like the rest of us like to think that we're good, and obviously up to a level we are, but once you get up to that, like you're in warp drive, you know?
It's amazing. We got some shots too of you with some very famous people.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at those, because sometimes when we see these faces, this shot here.
Oh, that was when I was still in South Australia. That was the 50th anniversary of Equity. Don Dunstan, Premier of the State.
Yep.
who was actually also
in the
a
centre.
secretary of the union
was.
in earlier
He
times.
actually started the theatre that I have, believe it or not.
Yeah, and Anne Levy, who was a very good Labour arts minister, and then the other ones are, Don Barker from Equity, and Michael Crosby and Susie Beale, Colleen Ross, who were other secretaries of the union celebrating our 50th anniversary.
But that's when you were here in Australia, but this...
1989, and this was when I was in England. So that's Tony Robinson.
Yes.
Baldrick from Blackadder is what most people know him from.
And from walking all over the world, it would seem, doing his travelogue programs.
And a great union activist.
What's this one?
This was the second time we saved the English National Opera. The Arts Council in England kept trying to cut it. They didn't want two opera companies. There was the Royal Opera House, so English National Opera they wanted to get rid of. And this is the chorus, who were at a press conference, and that's me speaking, and we then got them to sing at the journalists, and it was the most amazing thing, because if you've ever heard 40 people singing like that, the journalists the next day, when they wrote their pieces, it was our press release.
They were covered.
It had been
Covered
embedded
with
on
voice.
them
Yep.
with a voice. This is Miriam Margolyes.
It certainly is.
She used to come, I'm relegated to the second row there, but this was one of our delegations to Parliament. Miriam was another great union activist. I first met her in 1985 when she came to the Festival of Sydney, and she came and visited us then in the union. She was, a big activist in British Equity, and still is.
Yes.
And she'll say all this stuff on television, like she doesn't like kids and all this thing. When she was there, all the kids knew her from Harry Potter, and she brought them over, sat down with them, signed autographs. She was lovely to them.
That's the other thing. The bigger they are, usually the nicer they are.
That's right.
Because you realise that without the public, you've got nothing.
Absolutely right. And there are people who get that, and particularly the people at the top. Sometimes it's people a bit further down who are, harder to get along with.
Can be difficult. But you've finally come back to Australia.
Yes.
So have you really retired, or are you still dabbling?
Well, from the big job, the equity job, the titles got longer. I was the senior deputy general secretary by the time I finished, right? And I was also doing a lot of stuff for the International Federation of Actors. I was going around their congresses and training people in places like Moldova and Brussels and so forth.
Right.
So it was a massive job by the end. And I decided by the time I got to 60, I didn't want to do the huge big job anymore.
Yep.
I was also a Surrey County councillor because I was involved in politics. Like I was a Port Adelaide city councillor here. So I always had lots going. And I thought at 60, I'm going to stop the big job. They managed to persuade me to stay to 61. I stayed a year later, and then that was it. And then when we looked about what we'd do next, my daughter had come back here 5 years ago.
Well, hold that thought, and we'll let you know that after this short break. Stephen Spence is our special guest, and we've had a very interesting conversation. But you're back here in South Australia again.
I'm back here. My daughter came back 5 years ago. After Brexit, she didn't want to stay in the UK, so she came back. And when we were thinking, once we'd given up the big jobs, what will we do next? We thought, well, she's here. She's our only daughter. Why be the Northern Hemisphere? So we came back to Adelaide. Got a place down in the Aldinga Arts Eco Village where we're living. And, I wasn't going to do anything, but I've been judging with the Fringe. I'm doing a day a week for Adelaide Day Centre on homelessness issues. On the May Day committee, or helping organise the march and the dinner. So yeah, you get brought into more stuff,
Well, you've got to be active. You've got to be part of life, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I'm not dead yet.
And you're living if you're involved in something.
That's right.
Stephen, it's been lovely talking with you because I've known you for a long time. Then you disappeared. Now I know why. Yeah. And now you're back again. I saw you during the Fringe. Was that good?
Yes.
Just really quickly, did you enjoy what you were doing looking at the shows as a judge?
I did very much because it got you to see the latest stuff that's happening, and it's a real mixed bag of stuff, but it's really good. It kept you in touch. And each week, something I recommended got an award. So I haven't quite lost my ability to judge what's okay out there, I hope.
That's experience, isn't it? That's a lifetime of experience.
Yeah.
So best thing possible. Well, thank you so much for being part of our time this time. And thank you for being part of our time this time. And until next time we see you, keep yourself nice till then.